the plan today is I'm going to go through a bit of a PowerPoint presentation that I have all about the O-1 visas. So hopefully you're in the right spot. A little bit of housekeeping. We have a chat box that I think you should be able to use, but we also have a Q&A. Please feel free to pop your questions there, and I will try to get to them if I can. Obviously there's a lot of people on, and so I probably won't get to all of the questions, but I'll do my best. We had asked for questions ahead of time through Instagram ask me a question option. So I did get quite a lot of questions and we incorporated those as well. So we'll get to those. I try to slot them into wherever I thought made sense as far as the content. So we got some really good questions. So if you do have questions, feel free to pop them down in the chat, or if you're on Facebook, you can pop them in the comments as well there. Okay, so let's get started. Wish me luck. Trying to man these technology things solo, so bear with me in case I have any difficulties. Okay, so here is what we're chatting about today. Okay, so obviously I wouldn't be a lawyer if I didn't have a disclaimer at the start of the presentation. So we're going to chat about issues today that are legal in nature. This is not legal advice for you. Every situation is very unique and deserves really individualized attention. I am an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. And so by being here, we're not in an attorney-client relationship. Don't put anything confidential in the chat in case it goes to other people, and Facebook as well. Those comments are public, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, just a token disclaimer. Okay, so I'm really excited to be here today, and I hope you guys are too. Hopefully, is everybody excited to be here? Was getting a lot of amazing comments and emails and everything, so I could feel the sense of excitement ahead of the presentation. It's obviously a bit difficult to get feedback on a webinar, so if you guys want to post in the chat if you're excited to be here and what you're looking forward to learning about the O-1. The O-1 visa is a bit of a niche, or a lot of a niche, or niche, as they say here, practice area within immigration. So it's not necessarily something that every immigration lawyer would handle. Oh, Gabriella, thank you. Commented on my headbands, that's why I pointed to my head. But they're a niche practice area within immigration. Not everybody is going to be experienced or comfortable with this option, but I absolutely adore this option, and we handle so many O-1s, and so I'm super excited to present to you today. So I thought I would give you a little backstory about how I got into practicing O-1s. So there is a photo of me on my law school graduation here back in 2007, and that is with my late grandmother-in-law, my husband's grandmother, Busha, who passed away a few years ago. So there we are at my law school graduation, and then the photo on the right is, I think everybody will probably recognize it, but it's ice hockey. So what do these two things have in common? Well, what they have in common was after law school, I started working for a pretty high volume immigration practice. And they were mainly business immigration, but we did get, at the time they had a few O-1s and a P3 for like a cultural visa, and nobody really had experience. So I ended up being the person to take those visas. So we didn't have that many of them. And then about a year later, an opportunity came to go to pitch the immigration firm to a professional hockey team for their visa services. And lo and behold, I was tasked with being the attorney that was going to pitch O-1s and P1s, the sports visas, to this professional hockey team. And I obviously had, I was practicing maybe a pretty short amount of time, but I also had no clue about hockey at all. It was American hockey, ice hockey that we didn't have in Ireland. So So I went anyway. I did all my studying up on the sport and obviously was familiar with the visa, but did a lot more research because it's a relatively new option, the O&P. It's been around for maybe 30 years, so it hasn't been around for too long. And this was what, 12 or 13 years ago. Anyway, so I went and I pitched for the firm services with somebody in marketing, and we got the client. And so then I became their lead attorney. So I was the lead attorney for one of the professional hockey teams doing their sports visas. And so that's kind of how my entry started into this exciting field. That was many years ago. And since then, I've obviously left that firm and I've had my own firm, McEntee Law, for about 10 years. And so now, this was a photo of us from our National Immigration Lawyers Conference in Orlando, Florida, which, oh, I cannot wait till we can go back traveling again. But this was a year and a half ago. So I led the panel on O-1s and the Extraordinary Ability Green Card, the EB1A. At the conference. And so AILA is the National Bar Association for 15,000 immigration attorneys, and I was very honored to be picked to lead the O1 EB1 panel. And so essentially we're teaching other immigration lawyers about how to do these types of cases. I am also, this is also some pics from the conference, but I'm the media chair for AILA. So I'm media and advocacy from the national team. So that means that I do a lot of interviews with the media in relation to immigration changes, but also I do media interviews with clients for the O1. This is kind of where this is relevant here. We take a holistic approach to our O1 cases, and sometimes that includes doing interviews with them or kind of positioning them in a way that they can further their case, if that's one of the things that we're using for them. So some of you might recognize these guys, the Coronas. They are a really famous Irish band. When I set up my own firm, I knew these guys personally and started working with them on their visas, and then started working on tons of music visas for Irish bands and not just Irish bands, but that's how it started. And this was them at Lollapalooza, so got to celebrate their success there. And this is just kind of a backstory as to why we just really love these types of cases. Here's our client Mert. We also worked with him on O1s, but he has a very interesting story because he was a recent college graduate when we started working with him. And he had a startup, which is now a health, it's a like life-saving healthcare technology company, SwipeSense. But Mert is one of the people that, sometimes people think about O1s and they think, oh gosh, I'm not extraordinary. And we'll get into what that means later. People think that you have to have had a 40-year career before you can even go for the O1. And I'm here today to say that that's not how it has to be, and that it is possible for startup entrepreneurs who can be young and really successful and gain a good bit of traction in a short period of time. This can be an option for them too. Here's one of my clients, Yulia, an amazing artist from Russia, who was also here as a foreign student. And she got an O1. We worked with her and got her an O1 directly after college too. She's an incredible artist, and we were just honored to have the opportunity to work with her. And she's become a really good friend of ours, as do a lot of our clients. So here's another example of just some of our clients in different industries. So we work a lot with professional athletes. You can see some musicians in there that you might recognize, and like startup-y kind of companies, and just like it's non-industry specific as well. So keep that in mind. It's not just for the artist or the musician or the performer or the entertainer. It can be used in a variety of industries and for people in lots of different positions. And here's our team. So we have an amazing team. We pretty much have no staff turnover. So you have a lot of consistency with the people that will be working on your case. And we are based in the 2112 ecosystem, which is a huge music and entertainment system in Chicago. And I'm actually here in my office now, but we're just surrounded by creatives, surrounded by just like a great atmosphere of collaboration and just like being innovative. And we kind of take that approach to our cases as well. So I just think working in such a space like this really enables us to really connect with the clients as well. And we also have a podcast. So I hopefully you guys will get to check this out if you haven't seen it already. It's called Immigration Revelation. And not everyone here is a client, but a lot of them are. Somebody mentions working with Deirdre from our team on our J1. Yeah, one of our staff members, Deirdre, who's been with us for years here, used to work in the Irish Immigration Centre in Boston, and she's been with us and she's incredible. So thanks for pointing that out. But yeah, so here's some of our clients. The majority of these people here are clients, and they're amazing, different industries, different stories. And just like trying to highlight the amazing contributions that immigrants bring to the US. And so that's part of our vibe as well, is like, you know, getting to work in these really cool, fun cases for amazing people, and then trying to like inform the narrative and just chat about immigration in ways that we think are pretty exciting to us. Okay, so thanks for bearing with me while I went through that. I do think it's important to just talk about why we're so passionate about these cases and the experience that we have, because the bar is pretty high, as we'll see, and it is important that you work with somebody who's very familiar with these types of cases. Okay, so we like to think of the O-1 case in 3 separate buckets. Okay, and so when we're thinking about you know, people will say, what do I need for an O-1? So I think of them with these 3 things in mind. So the first thing is that we need to prove that you have extraordinary ability in your field. And spoiler alert, that will come later, you might end up being more extraordinary than you think, and oftentimes that's true. The second thing, you need a petitioner, sponsor, employer. A lot of flexibility. We got a lot of questions on this and we'll get into them later, but just this is the second piece of the puzzle here. And then finally, we need to show that you're going to continue working in your area of extraordinary ability. So let's think about these things in the 3 buckets, and then let's chat about what goes into each one of those individual buckets. Okay, so bucket number 1. There are two main types of O-1s that you might have heard of. So there's the O-1A and then there's the O-1B. Okay, so the O-1A is for people who have this extraordinary ability in science, education, business, or athletics, right? So that's the O-1A. And then the O-1B is the arts, right? And that's as much guidance as really we're given, motion picture or TV, okay? So I would say this is where we go back to, you know, being people, I think, get extremely put off by the word extraordinary ability. They tend to, and this can be a cultural thing as well, where I know growing up in Ireland, it was very, you know, much part of the culture that you don't like brag about your achievements. You know, it's at the risk of people saying, who does she think she, you know, who does that one think she is, and that type, you know. So that's in our nature, is that we're quite self-deprecating, and I find that happens a lot with clients. They say, oh God, I don't think I'm extraordinary. And one example that always comes to mind is we had a client of ours who was a very successful businessman in a particular industry, and he had been working for many years, for about 40 years. And I met him and I said, you know, this I think would be the option for you. And he just was kind of put off by it. He just thought he just didn't think he'd be able to meet the standard. And the man had launched a company that went public and had done all these types of incredible things. He had amazing press in one of the most well-known papers here in the US, and all sorts of stuff. And you know, he just was reluctant to call himself extraordinary. And so as we went through the evidence and we kind of went over the requirements, he did agree that, yeah, okay, we can meet these requirements. And we got his case approved, and he's had his O-1 ever since. But I just thought, if he's put off by it, I can see why other people are, just given how much experience he had in the field. And on that note, one of our amazing clients, who I think is on right now, we're working with her at the moment on her O-1B. She is an Irish documentary film producer, and she's incredible. So we're working together on her O-1. And again, she also was the same, where she's like, I don't think I'm extraordinary. Oh, she's here. Hi, I won't name you, but you're here. And she gave me this quote. She volunteered to give me a quote this morning. She said, I'm going to your webinar. Do you want a quote? And I said, yeah, definitely. So it just goes to show you that, look, she also was put off by it. And when we started looking at her stuff, you know, she had all these awards for this amazing documentary that she's done. She's done incredible things on film and just with lots of amazing talent. She is incredible. And you know, the film submissions for all these festivals, we have great letters, and it's a fantastic option for her. But she was also initially put off by it. So I would just say, open your mind to the possibility that you might be more extraordinary than you think. And you certainly, if, you know, and I wouldn't recommend an option for somebody that I didn't think had a good chance at it. I'm not going to waste my time and everyone else's time. We obviously can't guarantee that you'll get the case approved, but I can count on, you know, 3 fingers the amount of denied cases or non-approved cases that we've had in all my career. Now, that is not a guarantee that we can get your case approved, but it just means, and I also like to push the needle a bit as well, you know, with those younger startup clients as well. We like to be pretty like, I think, creative and innovative with our cases. But having said that, I mean, I'm not going to waste anyone's time or money or our own like energy. We put so much into these cases, you know, and you want like somebody that is all in about this, that believes in you. And you know, I wouldn't waste our own energy, time, resources if I didn't feel like it was a good shot for you. So if we think it's a good shot, you know, and you want to, it's always a bit of a leap of faith. We go together, but it's an informed decision and we take it, and, you know, and let's see where we end up. But, so, right. So the next thing is that we, oh yeah, so our client said she didn't think she would meet the standards before we spoke, and that we hear that a lot. We do hear that a lot. And I do think it is part cultural, part like just, you know, and the standard is high. Of course it's high, but it doesn't mean that you're not at that high standard already. So anyway, just keep an open mind to this. Okay, so then once we've decided that, you know, we think the option, you might be more extraordinary, I think the next thing is, you know, we spoke about the 2 different types, the O-1A or the O-1B. And then it's like, well, what am I? Am I O-1A? Am I O-1B? Does it matter? Why does it matter? And it does matter which option we pick. And sometimes it's not that clear cut, I will say. Certainly for our documentary producer client, she's obviously going to be O-1B in the TV or motion picture. You know, that's definitely Julia, an artist. She's clearly going to be arts. But I put these 2 pictures up because it's not always clear cut. And so one of these photos relates to a hairstylist client of ours that we got an O-1 for. Excuse me, just going to take a glass of water. So for this O-1 client, you know, we had met with them. We reviewed their work and their portfolio, and I thought definitely O-1B, right? They're a hairstylist, they're creative, artistic. They happen to have a brand of salons and other stuff as well. And so, but based on their case and on their expertise, I was very confident that this was an O-1B case. So we filed it as an O-1B, and the government came back and said, actually, we think this should be O-1A. They said, we think this person is more in the business side of things. And we'll get into why that matters later. But the government essentially said, well, we think you know, they're doing more business related stuff in the industry. And so we were able to go back and say, no, they're not. They're doing more creative stuff. The reason that they're at the talent that they are is because of their extraordinary ability as a stylist. One of the things this person was doing was platform work in hair shows, you know, where you're up on stage and you're doing all this platform work, like showing how to cut a hair, like a particular style of hair, that type of thing. And it was clearly like artistic, creative. Yes, they are in business too, but the main reason they're in business is because of their extraordinary artistic talent. And so we got that case approved in the end. And then the other client, another client who is in the entertainment industry, you know, initially we were thinking maybe it's more business because he's like on the operations side of things. But as we started looking into it, we realized that no, he's actually really the creative visionary behind a lot of these events. And so, and the evidence lent itself more to the O-1B, and we felt like that was a stronger case as well for him. So it just is something to think about. It's not always clear cut if you're going to be O-1A or O-1B. And it's very important which one we pick, and we'll get into why that is later on. Okay, so the next thing is, once we've picked out whether you're O-1A or you're O-1B, the next thing is like, what's your field? Okay, so we're not going to necessarily just say, I have extraordinary ability in arts, you know, or I have extraordinary ability in business. Then are we going to be compared to Mr., you know, Jeff Bezos, or who are we going to be compared to, Elon Musk? So we need to, this is what I call the Goldilocks approach, okay? Not too broad. You don't want to say computer science, then all of a sudden you're in a field that you're being compared to Bill Gates. And then on the other hand, you don't want to be too narrow where you're ranked at the top of a field of one. And there actually was a case, and included this in our panel that we did at the national conference in Florida last year. There was a case where it was a female bodybuilder from Mexico, and the case got denied, and I think they appealed it, and they didn't win the appeal. But the judge had said that being top of a field of one is meaningless, right? So you want to be at the top of your field, but if there's nobody else in your field, then it's way too narrow, okay? So you want to get that just right, okay? So like, let's say with our producer friend that we mentioned earlier, you know, her field is going to be, she's a documentary producer. So it's not just producer, then who is she compared? You know, it's a niche within her industry. And that is important, because how you define your field really kind of puts you in the pool of applicants, right? So it's critical that you define your field correctly. And this is where working with an experienced attorney, we can really help you dig deeper down into what that field is. You know, instead of, we had a fashion client, and instead of saying fashion designer, will that compare him to like Chanel, you know, or are we going to say he is a revitalizing a, you know, this was a certain type of fabric and stuff. I'm not going to share many specifics about it, but basically we niched down within his industry to the point that there were others in it. So he's not in a field of one, but he's at the top of a smaller pool. And this is something you do with athletes as well. Instead of saying, you know, soccer player, you can niche them down to goalkeeper, to whatever position they play. And so, yeah, so just keep that in mind. The Goldilocks approach to defining your field of expertise. Okay, now we're getting into why, you know, the meat of your case. And I wanted to show you, this is what an O-1B looks like. So this is an O-1B for a fashion designer client of ours. The case got approved straight away without a request for evidence. And there's our beautiful client, Petra. She did this design for us. She actually wanted us to take photos so that she could show everybody what went into her case and how much work it was. And obviously I took the pen for scale so that you could see what it looks like. I mean, we do feel bad when we file these cases because we kill a lot of trees, but it is required to file them in paper and also in duplicate with the USCIS. So, you know, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that until they get a bit more environmentally conscious. This is what we're doing. But this was her case, and she's just an incredible designer, and we are delighted that she is now here on her approved O-1. But that's kind of what you're looking at in terms of how much work goes into them. Okay, so this is a lot of text on this slide, but basically I just wanted to let you know that this is kind of our internal kind of process, our procedure for doing this is that we meet with our clients from the outset of the case, And I generally would have a consultation with people for an hour where we go over what is your field, show me what evidence, we'll go through the criteria and we'll see which ones are going to fit you best. We'll see what evidence we can use, and we can kind of like start to map out what the case would look like. Then after that, when we've decided that, you know, we kind of know what criteria we're using, then we have a team meeting in here, and myself, Ray, and Alex, the other attorneys here, are experienced case managers. Like I said, we have basically no turnover. So we've had our team members for years, and we all go over the case and we figure out, you know, what our strategy is going forward. One tip that I would give, and this is also, I think there are some other immigration attorneys on this panel or on this webinar, I generally recommend that people pick the 3 strongest criteria. We need to show that you, whether you're O-1A or O-1B, you need to show that you can check 3 of the boxes. A mistake that I see is that people try to push for, they try to push for like a 4th and a 5th. Sometimes it's even a 6th category. I've seen cases that have been denied from other people, and I think it's a mistake to try to push for more criteria. You, in my opinion, should pick the 3 strongest ones and really flesh out your case surrounding those. I will say that the once or twice I've strayed from that. If we have somebody, and we did have somebody who was like slam dunk for like every single one, and this is an O-1B, and I think for her we might have gone with 4 or 5, but generally my general rule is that you pick your 3 strongest criteria and you go from there. Okay, so now that we're on that, we're going to, right, so I mentioned the O-1A versus O-1B. There's different standards for each, right? There's a lower standard for the O-1B. This is like the legal part of it, but just what you need to know is that the O-1B has a lower standard than the O-1A, right? And that's why when the government says this person should be an O-1A, well, we pushed back and said no. I mean, for many reasons, but one reason is that the standard is slightly lower for the O-1B, and the evidence can naturally just be a better fit as well. Because there are different types of evidence that you can use. So here's the O-1 criteria. You know, I could probably honestly spend, you know, an hour just going through each of these. Excuse me, but we just don't have that time. But what I will say is that the ones that we use quite a bit are critical and essential role for distinguished companies. So where someone's had that kind of, you know, that really important role for distinguished companies. Press, so where they've been in the media. And this is definitely a quality versus quantity, although you do need media for a sustained period of time. So getting one feature in the Chicago Sun-Times and having nothing else, you know, wouldn't necessarily make the strongest case. And so this is kind of where people, I think, try to push for more when you just pick your 3 strongest ones out of these. Okay, so original contributions of major significance, we use that a lot as well. And notice that like some of these criteria are multifaceted. So let's say the original contributions. It's your contributions have to be original and they have to have major significance to the field. How do you show something's original? Well, if it's in the science, do you have a patent? Is there something that you've done that is a novel way of doing things? You know, whether it's, you know, some like food startup apps that are original, or we have this client in the energy space. And so that's one that we use quite a bit. And major significance, you know, that it had an impact on the industry. You can get letters to attest to that. So a lot of these can be, and you can use one piece of evidence to satisfy more than one of the criterion. So just keep that in mind as well. You only need to pick your 3 strongest ones, and this is a very much an individualized analysis to see what one would be best suited for the case in question. Okay, so the O-1B, right? Different criteria. Some of them are kind of similar, but they're different, right? And it's important, again, that I've seen other attorneys like use the O-1B criteria and O-1A, and it's like it's a totally different part of the regulations. So you show that you have it's a leader starring role for distinguished companies, distinguished productions or events. So this could be if you're a musician, you performed at you know, the Olympia Theatre, you sold that out. Or, you know, you were at a festival that was also put on by like Lollapalooza, is also a distinguished company. Press as well here. Expert recognition. So this is where expert letters can stand on their own, in their own standalone criteria, which is pretty important here. And so I would say that the ones that we typically use are those top 4. You know, we don't always have people who have, you know, depends on the industry. Some industries you just are not going to get the high salary that's needed, and it's in comparison to others in the field. So it is kind of graded against what the Department of Labour or what they think is generally, you know, a high salary for that particular role. Now we've had clients who have you know, in the startup space where they've raised a significant amount of capital, and their like venture capital, their startup has been valued at X amount, you know, that can be something that we can use there to show the valuation of the shares and how much they have in of the ownership of the shares. That can be something that we can use. And that's also, that high salary is also there in the O&A. So there is a bit of an overlap. And then for the EB1 green card, that I'm not really going to get into because I won't have time, but some of these are mirrored in the EB1 as well. And also just hopefully everybody is enjoying this and getting this, and I'm not going too fast. We have a lot of material to cover, but hopefully if you want to pop in the chat, if everyone's kind of following along, and if you've any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat as well. Okay, so I mentioned that we'd asked for questions before through Instagram and other ways, and so I just copy these questions directly here. Okay, so some of the questions was, is it better to focus on one aspect of you or include a range of different things that you do? So I would say this question goes directly to, oh, everybody, hi everybody, checking in. Good to see that you're all still with me. So someone asked about the procedure. We'll get to that later on as far as timelines, but thanks for asking that. Is it better to focus on a range or just more limited? So this comes down to what is your area of extraordinary ability. And so that's kind of something that's important to think about. Once you have your range, you want to have like a niche, right? So again, the Goldilocks approach, okay? Is it possible for welders to get this visa? I just thought that was an interesting question because it's not limited to the industry. It is possible for anybody to get this visa, assuming you're able to, you know, show that you have those buckets, those 3 buckets complete. Okay, so someone has asked, can any of the O&A criteria lend themselves to O&B? For example, being a judge or being part of a recognized organization in your industry. Okay, so there are distinct criteria. They are the ones that you use, right? So you're either O&A or you're O&B. But if you were a judge of somebody, I would first say, are you sure you're O&B, or are you better suited being O&A? If your evidence is lending yourself to the O&A, maybe you need to look at that. Being a judge of others, if you're in that position, then you would likely be able to show that you have expert recognition. If someone's asking you to be a judge, then you will obviously you're judging them for a reason, because you yourself would be an expert. So maybe whoever asked you to be a judge could provide a letter to show that you that they're an expert and they deem you to be at the top of your field. Another thing I would look at would be, could that be considered you having a lead or a critical role for a distinguished company? What were you judging, and who was it for? Being part of a recognized organization in your industry. So in the O&B, again, that would be, I would look to see whether you could use that as far as one of these other 2 criteria, you know. So they're not necessarily mirrored in the O&B. There are separate ones, but there might be a way to use the same piece of evidence in other ways. Okay, someone's asked, what about a film student that is about to complete school? So you don't necessarily have to have been in the industry for, 30 years, but you need to be able to check 3 of these boxes. And so obviously the more time you've been working, the more you have to work with, the more material you have to use, the more just the more work experience you have. But you don't have to have, X amount of years of experience. So I would say it is possible. to get that. Same with age. Someone's asking about age. Age does not matter. We've had O-1s approved for people in their early 20s. I mean, we have had them straight from college to O-1 after working for a couple of years. It just really depends on your case. Okay, somebody's saying, is it common to go to an O-1 after a H-1B visa? Yeah, I mean, we do that quite a bit, depending on the specifics. We could do that. I would say you also want to think about what your long-term goals are. If it's a green card, are you looking at O-1 as a stepping point to the EB-1A green card? So that could be something to keep in mind. Someone's wondering, do they take into consideration the time that you've spent in the States? If you've been in the US for X many years, I would say it depends what you've been doing, right? So you can certainly use that as work experience, assuming you have been working lawfully in the US. So you can use your work experience to maybe to check some of these boxes. So absolutely, you can use it. They don't necessarily give you credit for just being here, but you can look at what you've been doing throughout that time and try to see, can you check some of these boxes? Okay, so hopefully these are great questions. Keep them coming in. Okay, so next, okay, bucket number 1 question. These are other questions that I got in from Instagram from somebody I know who's an actor. So he asked, how important are awards in my field? He's on national TV, but has not received any awards. Okay, that's a great question, right? Hopefully everybody is alive and with us and excited still for all these questions. And then, do I need much press, is this person's asking. Okay, so I would say awards are important if we're using the award criteria, right? If that's the criteria and one of them that we've picked for you, then awards are going to be important. But if you haven't received any awards, then I wouldn't even, that's irrelevant to you. We're not even going to be using that. Do you need much press? Okay, so assuming we're going to use press, then you need it to be the type of publication is critical, because we want to show that it's a major publication. So we want to show that, you know, regional, like local regional publications, I think do way more harm than good for your case, and trade publications that aren't as widely read also hurt your case, because the press has to be major, and it has to be about you, and that's also been a hot topic, you know. We had seen this where you know, there was an article, let's say, mentioning multiple companies. Well, is it about you if you're just named in some of it? I would argue absolutely. So so that's something else. Oh great, some of my friends, I see all my musician friends from Ireland asking questions, lots of great questions. So okay, so back to the criteria, right? So the awards are important if we're using them. The press, it is a question of quality as well, and you do need to have it sustained. So it just depends. If there's another criteria that's stronger for you, then we might not even use the press. So we'll see. Okay, so I mentioned the 2 buckets. That whole thing is bucket number 1, showing that you're extraordinary. Okay, bucket number 2 is you need someone to file the case for you. Okay, now this is another part where I feel like people have this roadblock where they say, I don't have an employer, or I don't know any, you know, they don't have anybody to file the case for you. And I will say that that may be okay. We might be able to figure out a way to structure the case that doesn't necessarily fall under what you would consider like a traditional sponsored case. So we'll meet with you. We'll figure out what's on the table. What are your like contacts here in the US? What you want? Like, what are your goals? Are you trying to do your own thing? You know, you can't really freelance, and we'll get into that later. But like, what are your individual goals? Like, you want someone who can sit down and meet with you and really try and figure this out, because as much as the O-1 case is a great option if it works for you, you need to be able to do what you wanted to do, right? There's no point in getting an O-1 approved and then it won't give you the flexibility, or it won't allow you to really work in your field in the way that you had envisioned. So just to we're back. Back in business. Okay, thanks guys. Lots of yes, we're still here. Okay, thanks guys for your patience. How funny was that I had the green screen from my daughter's space thing as well? Oh gosh. Anyway, we're back in business and we're back to I think I missed the questions. That's the only thing. If you asked a question and I didn't answer it, would you mind putting it back in the chat? That would be great. Okay, and we were getting into the really good part, which is really the possible options for structuring the sponsor of the case, right? So you can't personally sponsor yourself for an O-1, but a company can sponsor you for it, and you can have an ownership in that company. And we would chat about what that would look like in terms of how you would structure it. Another way to do it, which is something that we use quite a bit, is that you have an agent sponsor you as a petitioner. And so you can have it where it is someone who could be a friend of yours, somebody could be in the industry. It makes sense if the agent is connected to the industry and it's not just a random, friend or a company. So ideally somebody that knows about the industry. And so that part of the narrative really kind of all makes sense. They can file it for you as an agent employer or on behalf of multiple employers. So we had a client who was a designer who had a contract with a very like specific big household name designer, right? And she didn't want to be an employee of theirs. She wanted to set it up like an agent. So she had an agent file the case for her, and also allowed her the flexibility to do other types of similar work, similar design work, because it was filed on behalf of multiple employers, and we had outlined that in the case. So this is where skill really comes into it with the attorney, knowing how to structure it. Also, you can have it for an agent for a foreign employer. So if you have a company in Ireland or wherever you are overseas, you can have somebody file this. We did this for somebody who's in the music industry. He has a company abroad, and he had a big label file it for him, not as direct employer, but on behalf of his foreign employer, as his foreign company that was being his employer. So really just know that there's flexible options. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't have an employer in the US to file my O-1, which we did get that question from quite a few people ahead of time, and it is something that comes up always. It might not be, you might be able to get around that, legitimately get around that by exploring some of these flexible options. Oh, Aoife, I see your question there, and I will get to that as well about adding people as your support staff. So bucket question number 2. So these were the questions. I'm in business. What would you look for in an O-1 application sponsored by her employer? So it depends on what you want from the case. Does your employer want to sponsor you? Do you want to try and do your own thing? So just keep that in mind as well. It would just depend on really what, what's on the table for you. Right. And then the next is, are there any limits with this visa while in the US? Example, setting up a company. So I would say, who's your O-1 sponsor? Are you in an O-1 already? Do you want an O-1 in the future? If so, will your newly created company be your O-1 sponsor? And so that might be another way to do it. I mean, if you're on an O-1 for an employer, in your employer X has sponsored you for job Y, you are going to be limited to working for that employer most likely. And if you want to do your own thing, you might need to either file an amended O-1, file a new O-1. It just kind of depends on how your existing case is structured, but certainly kind of figuring this out from the start is a way to give you more flexibility. So keep that in mind. Okay. Bucket number 3. So bucket number 1 is showing you've extraordinary ability. Bucket number 2 is showing that there's somebody that's going to file this case for you, knowing that can be flexible arrangements depending on your industry. And we work in very non-traditional industries a lot. Someone's saying that they have a startup, and so bucket number 3 we'll get to, but this is relevant for this. She has a startup and she has some clients in the US, but the business partner is also American. Can either of those sponsor you? Yes, but they potentially could be your sponsor, but it would depend on what way you want to structure the work that you're going to be doing. So think about that. I mean, if you have a startup in Ireland and you could be here working for your foreign employer, then maybe you could set it up like an agent type O-1. And then this is now directly relevant to you, because depending on what way you've structured the case, that will dictate what evidence you need to provide for bucket number 3. right? And that's showing that you're going to continue to work in your area of extraordinary ability. You need to be able to show that the work you're going to be doing falls within your area of expertise. And we spoke about that, right? That it's your niche, your niche within your field, right? If you are in a straight up employer-employee type relationship, here, then you're going to have an employment contract. If you have a multiple agency type situation where, the designer who wants to work for all these other people, we had agency agreements prepared, and each one of those signed off ahead before we filed a case. That was all put into this is what she's going to be doing for the next 3 years, right? Would you have a publishing deal? If it's for a foreign employer, do you have an employment contract with your employer abroad? Okay. If so, then that would be evidence that this is what you're going to be doing for the next 3 years. It's through your Irish company, but it's in the US. You do need specifics as well. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to just work in my area. We need to show what it is that you're going to be doing. And this is where where the straight employer-employee relationship is more straightforward, because everything you're doing is your employment contract for 3 years. So this is just such an individualized analysis. We need union letters depending on what your industry is. So if you're a musician, we're going through the American Federation of Musicians. If you're a director or producer, there's different unions for those, and they need to see a copy of the case before we file it to approve it, to make sure that you're extraordinary up to their standards as well. And then the O-1A versus O-1B, there's more flexibility with the O-1Bs to kind of adding things on and changing itineraries later on in the case. So, but you can set up an O-1 to give you O-1A to give you added flexibility. But just keep in mind that, again, these differences are important, what case you're going to be filing. So bucket number 3, I thought this question to me hit both of these buckets. So they asked whether O-1B support letters and deal memos, how many do you need, and is it quality or quantity? So I would say, what is the purpose of these? Are we using these to show that you're extraordinary? If we're using them for a bucket number 1, are we looking at that expert recognition category? Is that the criterion that we're trying to show? If so, who are the experts? What are they going to say about you? How much is their expertise established in the industry? Are they a household name? The USC, the officers that are reviewing this case are obviously human too. And I think a celebrity kind of factor is helpful. I think that we want to present the case, like that case, to them in the most approvable way possible, right? We take so much time with our O-1 cases, and we want to have everything there at their fingertips. We have circulation statistics for all the press. We have, highlighted exactly where they're mentioned. We tell you exactly the significance of the article, of the publication, of the expert letter drafters. We have quotes put in. We've all this stuff presented to them in a nice, neat little bow so that we make it as approvable as possible. We obviously can't guarantee that it's going to get approved, but we work our heart. We put our hearts and souls into these cases to make sure that we present the strongest case possible. Okay, so some questions someone had asked about, procedure and stuff like that, and how long does it take? So it can take a couple of months to prepare an O-1 case, depending on the evidence that we have, once you get it filed, you can either file it with regular processing, or you can file it where you're expediting the processing. One thing that we've noticed recently is that the processing times have come down quite a lot. So they used to be 3-4 months long, but now cases of late recently, some of them are getting approved pretty quickly, even without opting for the expedited processing service, which is pretty expensive. It's an extra $2,500 just in a government fee. So, I would say strategize about whether that's necessary for you. Okay, how long does the visa last? So we can request up to 3 years on the O-1. So, and you can potentially extend it and renew it. And so that to me gives you a great shot at, it's a great timeline, 3 years to come to work, to do your thing, to really be able to take your shot at the American dream, whatever that is, whatever that means for you. It gives you 3 years to do it. What's the rate of success? I mean, we personally have had very few denials, but I don't know what the approval rating is across the board. But again, you know, we're not really going to recommend it if it's something we didn't think would be a good option for you. Okay, so somebody is asking, okay, there's a couple of questions about bringing staff, so I'll mention that afterwards. Then thanks for those questions. Keep popping them in there. So will it be easier under this administration? Hard to say. I mean, it's not going to be harder, I would imagine. We saw the previous administration get rid of any type of, you know, in the past, if you'd been approved for O-1s before, we would still file a giant renewal. But safe to say that if you were extraordinary before, you know, chances are you're probably still extraordinary. And the previous Trump administration just completely got rid of that, and everything was filed from scratch with no, you know, just no consideration for any previous approvals. So another question, are we hearing about a change in tone and attitude from the new administration? I mean, it's very early days, but there is a completely new, different tone from this administration. The Trump administration removed the phrase a nation of immigrants. That was part of the USCIS's, so the agency that reviews these cases, that was part of their mission statement, and they took that out. Okay, so I guess, look, it depends on just, we just have to wait and see, but we always prepare the case as strong as possible anyway, just to make sure, you know, that we're putting our best foot forward. Somebody asked about the EB1 green card. So it is possible to go straight from the you don't even need to go to O1. We filed multiple cases straight to this EB1 green card. And we actually got one approved there last week for somebody, a tech entrepreneur who was on a H1B, who we determined, you know, he could maybe go straight to the EB1, and his case got approved. And so that's a strategy that can be good for many reasons, but you know, there's just EB1A could be a good fit because it gives you real flexibility with future employment prospects. Okay, I'm going to just pop this up here really quickly. We're doing a special consultation for attendees, and we normally charge $300 for a consultation. We're going to do a discounted rate of $200. So that will be an hour with me where we get to go over all this evidence to see whether O1 is going to be a good fit for you. If you decide to hire us, we will credit that $200 off the fee for the case. But this is limited availability. So we are not like a high volume firm. We're very selective we're a boutique practice. And so we're limiting it to 50 people. And there's a sign up link there, and you can go on our website and get it there. I think I might also be able to pop this into the chat, although I'm afraid everything will just go anyway. I'm afraid to even put anything in the chat, but yeah, I'll leave that up there so you can see that. So if it's something that you think you want to explore further, you can see how much is involved in it, and you can see that, you know, you really need to give yourself the time to see if this is a good fit for you, and you want to put your best foot forward. If you've had an O1 denied, you do have to disclose it in subsequent cases. So, you know, I just am a firm believer in putting your best foot forward from the start. Okay, so I'm going to get to some of these other questions that have come in. So somebody said, okay, so someone says, if you are accepted on an O1, can you bring anybody else with you? Okay, and this is kind of similar to another question that was asked. So O1s can bring their support staff with them, assuming they're integral and essential to their work. So you can bring them on an O2 as an essential support. So a musician will bring the whole backing crew with them. You know, if they're a solo artist, they'll bring all their band, they'll bring their band managers, everybody will come on an O2. It is a separate case that has to be filed for the supporting staff. And that will be the same for designers. Somebody who I know is a designer is asking that question there as well. And so you can bring, if you had an assistant that we could show had worked with you, you know, has experience working with you, so that we can say they're really essential to your success. Then they can get their own supporting case, and they can come with you as your support staff. So somebody's asking, is it possible to apply for an O1A as a clinical physical therapist? How are the criteria met? So any industry can use the O1. We've used O&As for scientists, for, I mean, you just need to go through that criteria list and see what are your 3 ones that you're checking the box for. So someone's asking, they have a P3 case, how will I compare the 3? So P3 is for culturally unique. Totally different analysis when you're looking at that compared to the O1, which is that extraordinary ability, right? So for the P3, sometimes people can go, especially musicians, like we work with a lot of Irish musicians who could be a P3, but they get a year, versus maybe the O1 where they could get 3. Someone's asking of examples of cases I wouldn't take on, and what would I do to strengthen the case. So I would not take on a case if I felt like we hadn't, someone asked a question. So sorry, I'm getting all these raising hands and questions. So I wouldn't take on a case if I didn't feel like we had 3 criteria that we could meet. I wouldn't take it on if and sometimes I say to people, you're not quite O1 yet, I don't think, but give yourself a year. Identify, put your eye on the prize of these, like, I'm going to try to get press, or I'm going to try to get more expert letters or awards, or I'm going to show that I have a distinguished. So there's if you have a laser focus about what type of criteria you're going after, I think you'll set yourself up for success there with that. It's not to say that everybody can get an O1 given time, but that's what I would do to see. Okay, so someone's saying, can you renew your O1 from inside or outside the US? So this is a real strategic question that is super important, because how you file the case can depend on whether you can extend your status in the US or whether you need to leave. And the way the processing times are for trying to get a visa appointment abroad, you really need to make sure that this case is filed in the best way possible for you. So I don't know enough about your situation. This is obviously not legal advice, but where I can extend someone's status in the US versus having them travel abroad in a pandemic with, no visa appointments, I would opt to really try to see what we can do to keep them here in the US. Okay, someone's saying, do many people in the area of finance and sales and trading use it in the O1? Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had people. One of the O1s that we got was for somebody who had that company, but that he had done extremely well in, but he was mainly in the sales area of that company. And so, yeah, I would say, again, we're looking at the criteria. Just think about it like this. It's no matter what your industry is, you potentially can use the O1. Okay, so we just need to look at the categories and see what we can get, right? Okay, does having any relatives help in relation to the process? I don't really think it does, and I feel like having someone who's related to you be a petitioner wouldn't be a good idea. I wouldn't think so. Again, without knowing more, I would say, what other options do we have, right? Somebody's asked about whether, okay, will the slides be sent out? You guys can email. Okay, so here's a few other resources. Upcoming events, so excited. I was like, why not use the alliteration of my name with Friday and Facebook Live and everything? So this Friday, February 5th, oh my God, there's so many. First Friday on Facebook Live. So I'm going to try and do these once a month on McEntee Law's Facebook page. I mean, I can see all the questions that are coming in here, and we could all be here for a lot longer. But that's where I'm heading to next. If on Friday for one of these events, I'm going to talk about the travel ban, H1B visas coming up, have an open floor for questions as well. And someone wants these slides, email us and I'll see what we can get you as well. So here's our email address there. Again, I'm going to pop up this consultation option. It's only for a limited amount of people because we just don't have capacity to take everybody on. Someone's asked, do you have to have a job before you apply? So again, this goes back to who's your sponsor, who's going to be your bucket number 2 sponsor, and what are you going to be doing? We do need to show that you're doing something in your field. And so what would that look like for you? Well, what's your industry? What is, what is typical in your industry? It just depends on what the situation is, but you need to show that you're going to be working in your field. And that can take many forms depending on what your nature of your industry and your type of work as well. Okay, so I think I almost have have gotten everybody, or at least the majority of them. There's some more coming in fast and furious. Oh, thanks very much for the thanks everybody for being here, for putting up with my minor technical difficulties. Show business for you. But it's been my pleasure to talk to you about this. I love these visas, if you can't tell. We all adore them. And when we add team members to our team, when I recruit, we tell people about these types of cases because everybody loves them. And so we only get people who are great writers, who want to work on these cases, who believe in the mission of bringing amazing immigrants, all immigrants, to the US, but you know, in working on these cases. So it's super important to me that our whole team is so invested in every single case that we do. And we would love the opportunity to work with you. And there's plenty of time to see us, like I said, on the Facebook Live. Get in touch with us, follow us on social media. We're gonna hope, I mean, I had planned to have this recording available, but I don't know what's gonna happen with that. It's gonna be like in two parts. Of someone saying, oh, I'm keeping them going with my positivity. Thank you. Hopefully, is everybody feeling positive? I mean, it's a new administration, it's a new year, the vaccination's coming, there is a lot of positive stuff coming. And I think that the future is like really bright. And we've been through a lot, you know, collectively. And we're ready now to step into this new chapter, and we're ready to just start looking at immigration from the lens that it should be viewed, which is a positive contributions. I mean, the amount of O-1 visa applicants that I've worked with and their contributions to the US have been incredible. We should be so lucky to have these people here. So thank you all for your time today. I look forward to seeing you all on some St. Bridget's Day, the first day of spring. Oh my God, it's the first day of spring and there's an insane amount of snow in Chicago. So thanks for sticking with me through all these ups and downs all along the way. For those of you who are on social media, my Instagram is kind of where I'm at these days. It's at US Visa Lawyer. Also McEntee Law on Instagram, Twitter. We have a YouTube, basically every kind of, you know, you name it. We even started on TikTok, some of the attorneys in our firm. So I will sign off for now, but take care, everybody. Mind yourself, and I will see you all very soon.